And that's working. Good. Okay, so everybody, welcome, and Warren, thanks again for being here. I'm so grateful, and I think all of you guys have seen me gush a bit in emails and tell you why I think you should be here and why this is a special privilege to be joined by Warren, who's been a great friend and mentor for a number of years. Gosh, probably about 13 years now. I think it was 2004, Warren, when my dad introduced the two of us. So Warren was our he was our executive coach when I was at Preferred Warranties when we were building a sales team. He was a sales trainer, did many sales training calls with my sales team, listened to me many times when I was having challenges and difficulties with a variety of things in business. And I want to get more to having a discussion with him than me talking. So yeah, with that, Warren, maybe you could just share with us a little bit about your career and some of the businesses that you worked in and started and how you got to consulting. Would you mind doing that?
No, and you feel free to stop me and add or delete anything as we go along, Wayne, and whoever's on the call. But yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me to work with you today. It's really a pleasure because I've worked with Wayne and Wayne's companies and Wayne's people for years, as Wayne just mentioned to you. And when you work with Wayne, you're working with a star. And I wish I had, over the years, all the clients like Wayne. My job would have been, well, I probably wouldn't have had that many clients because Wayne's doing so well. But it's just a pleasure to work with a guy who, when you talk about management situations and sales situations, and the guy questions you, and you develop the plan, then he just goes and does it. It's like Nike, you just go do it, and I enjoyed working with Wayne. Yeah, to respond to your questions, Wayne, I got in my working environment when I was young. Went to work for a car dealer in the back shop, and then through the help of my father, bought into the Chevy Buick deal, and that company is still in our family today. My three sons run that company, the Chevy Buick deal in Palmyra. I've had a lot of successes, and I've had a lot of failures, and that those of you in sales should relate to that because you got to get a lot of no's before you get a yes. I bought. I thought it was really good in the car business as we went along, and I bought 3 auto companies in the late 70s, early 80s. And for those of you, well, none of you are as old as I am, but we were highly leveraged, and we had our businesses when we bought in at about a 4% interest, and within a year and a half, they went to 22%, and that's how you can get the business failure because the companies just couldn't support themselves. We've had leasing companies. We've had, I think one of the real wins we had was what they call an aftermarket company in the auto business. It's paint sealants and fabric protectors and rust proofing and stuff like that. We started a company in Pittsburgh, and that was highly successful. Recently, we had a finance company that we started in Palmyra, and it grew to about 10 different offices, and the people were terrific, and we won the Entrepreneur of the Year award through Inc. magazine and Ernst & Young CPAs. We had about 200 employees when we were invited to Palm Springs and competed for the national. We didn't win the national, but I was really proud of our group. We got home, and Penny and I were really pleased with the way the company was going, and we got fired a month later. So I know what it's like to get fired from my own company. Started my consulting business, which is where Wayne and I come from, and spent 20 years in that. We really developed a lot of good clients and had a lot of fun in that business, and that was like Wayne said, an executive management coaching and sales coaching business. So I hope that wasn't too much, Wayne, but that's kind of my background. Now I'm 25 years married to my beautiful wife, and we have 3 sons and wonderful daughters-in-law and 6 grandkids and a great-granddaughter. So now I'll shut up when you can do what you need to do. Ask me questions.
And those things are the big successes for sure. A great family who have enjoyed getting to meet. So one of the things we talked about this morning that I asked if you would share would be we have some sales people on the line. We have some business owners. We have one VP of sales on the line running a sales force. But what maybe your favorite success story of somebody you worked with who had a major turnaround?
Well, the nice thing I think about what we're doing today is I've sat in the owner's, president, CEO's chair, and I've also sat in the sales chair. I enjoy both of them. The individual that I think I can recall that I enjoyed her success the most was a gal probably pretty early on in my consulting career that she was referred to me and called me on the phone, and shortly after we began to talk, she was in tears. She worked for a national investment advisory group, and I'll be careful that I won't mention names or anything, but her boss was requiring her to make a couple hundred phone calls a day, and can you imagine, a couple hundred cold calls a day? And she was getting, with her script, about 6 appointments, I think, over a week or two. And she said, I think I'm failing. I think I'm going to get fired. So we made an appointment. She came to the office and we talked. And I said, can you not tell your boss the entire truth that I'm telling you to do? In other words, I don't want you to make 200-300 calls again each day. I want you to make 25 and follow what we coach. And long story short, she started to do that, and she began to set about 6 appointments a week with the 25 calls a day. And within a year, about a year and a half, she called me and told me that she was promoted to branch manager, and to this day, I know she's doing very, very well in the company. So that was, I think, the individual success that I can often think about the most, Glenn.
Can you recall something that changed in what she was doing in the calls that she was making? What was the big turnaround?
Well, I think so. And you can imagine, for those of you who have made a lot of cold calls, when you make a couple hundred calls a day and you follow a script, it just becomes so monotonous, there's no excitement. When you reduce that to like 25 calls, 30 calls a day, and really care about the call, your whole attitude changes. And that's one of the major keys in sales, as those of you know. Her whole attitude changed, and she became really interested in bringing value to the people that she was talking to, and that's how she got so many increase in appointment calls, or calls when she made appointments when she made the calls. Her attitude changed the most.
So that fits well with something that we talked about this morning too, that it'd be great if you shared, and that is a few times lately you've said to me this kind of catchphrase that selling, and over the years you've said selling is easy, don't make it hard. Could you elaborate on why you say that, and maybe share the 3 points that you shared with me earlier today?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And if you want to fill in the blanks, Wayne, you feel free to. Okay. But a lot of salespeople and a lot of business owners make sales difficult, and they do it because they have to remember all these. How many closes do you have to remember, and how many times do you have to practice asking particular questions, and it just goes on, and they work so hard on technique that when they get in on a sales call, they forget what they memorized, and the call becomes very difficult and usually not successful. When I say make the sale easy, I think I always had to, and I think my good clients had to keep it simple. There are three things I think you need to concentrate on, as I shared with you earlier, Wayne. And I called my website Bat Coach, B-A-T. You have to do the right A. You have to have the right attitude. You have to feel good about yourself and feel that you're bringing value to your prospect and your client. You have to have the right behavior. That's the attitude, the behavior, the technique. You have to do the right behavior. You have to set the right goals. You have to write plans that if you accomplish them, they'll achieve the goals. And you have to put them into action. And I have a buzzword that I call a cookbook, which is a recipe that you do on a daily basis. And if you have the right attitude, feel good about yourself, we call it their identity. And if you do the right behavior, then the third thing is, and probably the least important, is the technique. I don't believe in memorizing all this stuff that often traditional training teaches you to do. I think you just have to have a few good 30-second commercial and a plan of what you're going to do in the first couple of minutes that you're going into a sales call. And from then on, you just play off your prospect and your customer and listen to them and be comfortable getting a no, because, gee, it all depends what business you're in. You got to get a lot of no's before you got to get a yes. So be okay with that. People aren't rejecting you. They're just not, they don't have a need. They don't think they have a need or a hurt for what your product or service is. So keep it simple. Get the right attitude, do the right behavior, and do a couple of very simple techniques, which is the 30-second call and what you do to start a sales call, and et cetera.
And what would be your best advice to a business owner who has a small squad of salespeople, or one of there's a couple of sales managers or VPs on the line who have a few more people, more like 10 or 12, and one person, Mike, has several regional managers who each have a squad of 5 to 8 people. How does a sales manager help people with those three things?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because my involvement with clients always started with the head honcho. I had to go in and see the owner or the president or the CEO, and often the conversation went directly to sales. And they would say something like, fix them. And I often laughed about it. Who's them? Fix my sales department. They aren't selling enough, kind of thing. And I kind of laughed, and we had developed a little bit of bonding, and I said, usually the problem starts at the top. So maybe we ought to talk about you, and then we'll talk about your people. So if we take a look at ourselves, we say, okay, we probably ought to take a look at what we're doing, thinking before we talk about helping other people. I think that if I'm answering your question properly, Wayne, I think you got to bring the right people on board. Well, how do you get the right people? I think you got to benchmark your position, and I think you got to do some assessments that are directed to the benchmark, and then you got to do a good interview, And when you hire the person, you got to bring them on board properly. I call it onboarding. That's kind of a buzzword in the business today. And onboarding them means don't bring them on board in the first day or two, hand them a briefcase and tell them they are one. You got to work with them. You got to coach them. I believe good salespeople really enjoy ongoing coaching, counseling, and reinforcement. They don't enjoy scripting. They don't enjoy going to one-day seminars because you forget about it in 30 days. Sales managers and owners without sales managers who directly work with their salespeople have to understand that salespeople need help. They want to be coached. They want to be evaluated. They want to be current. People are concerned about them. And you have to have a little outline of what your salespeople are to do, and then work with them and coach them. Business ownership and business management is a lot more than just hiring a sales manager, hiring salespeople. You need to work with them daily, constantly. It's the most important thing. Nothing happens till somebody sells something you've all heard that before. Does that help answer that question, or did I digress?
No, it's good. All this has been helpful. And by the way, so people on the line, if some of this now starts to get you thinking, and there's a question you want to ask, I had a couple of questions that were submitted ahead of time that I'm going to make sure I ask Warren. But if some of this gives you some context for, Warren, one thing I forgot to mention is, Warren, I asked you this morning how many businesses you thought you had worked with over the years, and you said something like 300 to 500, but I don't know. I've never really thought about that, which I know if we did the math, that means you've probably worked with 4,000 or 5,000 salespeople over the years. Some of it was doing training, sales training. Some of it was helping business owners, so maybe not directly. So everybody, if there's something that this makes you want to ask a question and I haven't asked it or gone deep enough, let me know. And then I'll interject that and put it in the question box, chat it in. We'll go from there. Well, one of the things, Warren, it made me think of is I've heard salespeople say, I don't want to be micromanaged, and my manager's a micromanager. So how do you think a business owner or sales manager can work with their people, coach them, develop them, without being a micromanager? What's the difference between constructive, solid work with people versus what would be micromanagement?
Well, I think that a sales manager or a business owner who directly is working with salespeople, you got to form a team of me working with you, you working with me. It shouldn't be. So many times I've run into managers who just keep score. Turn in your call sheet and let me calculate it out and give you hell if you didn't do enough, and if you were failing in certain things. It wasn't a coaching situation, and I think that is primary, that you have to form a relationship team with people, and then you have to be sure that your people are doing the right things, because if you have an outline of what a person should be doing to get to a sales appointment, which we call the cookbook, and if on the sales appointment they do certain things in the first few minutes to get the sale rolling, then you should evaluate that. Your salesperson should evaluate that. I often said, hey, when you leave a sales call, pull around the block and shut off your engine and fill out an evaluation sheet of how you did. And the way you can do an evaluation sheet is if you know what you should be doing on a sales call. So, and then you work with your sales manager, or the sales manager works with your sales consultant, and it's like, okay, I did this and this, but I missed this. Well, why? And then you talk about it. And I think role playing is very, very important. A lot of sales managers and owners don't role play with their people, and frankly, I think because they don't want to show that they make mistakes. And we know that sales is a business where you don't do it right all the time. So sales managers and owners should role play with their salespeople, and that's the way they get good. The manager gets good, and the salesperson gets good. So, and last thing I want to mention to you on this particular thing, Wayne, and then you tell me if you want to talk about some detail on this. But I believe that you should sit down with your salesperson. As a manager, you should sit down with your salesperson, determine what your goals are. What are your goals for your day, for your week, for your month, for your quarter, for your year? And put those down in writing. And then what am I going to do to achieve those goals? We call that a plan. What are you going to plan? What's your plan to achieve those goals? And then you drop down to the third thing. What do I have to do on a daily basis to achieve my plan, to achieve my goals? And if we construct a good system with our people to write your goals, write your plan, and write your daily behavior, then it's easy to coach back. Then you talk about your daily behavior. What did you do that's going to achieve your plan, to achieve your goals? It seems to work very easily, and this falls into the, selling is easy if you just want to do a few things. Don't get involved. You know what? Sales is sales 101. It doesn't have to be sales 102 and 3 and 4. Just keep it simple and have fun and enjoy it. That's the best thing.
What would flip it around? I'm going to flip it around a bit. If you were a salesperson, how do you get the most from your relationship with your sales manager, business owner? What advice would you have for approaching interactions? So there's two sides to micromanagement. Sometimes salespeople say they're being micromanaged, and it's a defensive thing, or it's a just leave me alone. I want to go do my own thing. Any thoughts for the other side of that, salespeople, how they can get the most out of the relationship with their manager?
I'm just thinking off the top of my head. First thing is to my manager, and again, you got to develop a good rapport. You got to be able to share with your manager. I would say, I don't want any games played. So let's not play any games. I want you to be straight with me. I'll be straight with you. An evaluation process. I want to know how I'm doing as far as what you would like me to be doing. So let's set up an evaluation process. And really, what I just shared with you a few minutes ago, the goals, plan, action is a very good evaluation process. Then the person helps construct the goals, plans, and action, and they can help evaluate themselves with their manager. I think the third thing I'd ask for is proper training. Again, I don't believe in these one-day seminars. They're just lousy. I believe in ongoing coaching, counseling, reinforcement, and good managers want to give that to their salespeople, and good salespeople want to get whatever they can in the technology end, in the good role playing. I think you should look for groups that sales people get together in groups, maybe once a month or once every quarter. Get together with other salespeople that are better than you are, that are doing better than you are. Tap their brain. Businesses do that too. So I think I'd look for that if I was a salesperson. No games, a good evaluation process, and give me the help I need in technology, equipment, training. Is there anything else you can think of, Wayne, that we put in that?
Well, I think what I hear the common thread throughout is just clarity. Like, just give me. When I was an employee, when I first started out and was doing sales and business development, which was in the construction field, what I really always just wanted from my manager and from the company was clarity. I wanted to know clearly, how am I doing? I wanted to know, what am I supposed to do next? What do you expect of me? I really wanted to know how I got the truck with the logo on the side. That was important to me. Because that was one of my hot buttons and motivators, but it's different for everybody. I do know this idea of, you mentioned something about getting around other people who are maybe better than you, and even today, that's a hard concept for me when I join up with a mastermind group of other people who are, quote, I've asked you about this and talked to you about it, who are better than me. It's hard on the ego. On the other hand, I know it always makes me a better person when I'm getting in a room of people who are in some ways, maybe there's areas I'm ahead, but on the whole, they're ahead of me and they're sharper than my current skills. It's hard, but I think you're right.
I had a company just in the last month that joined a group of company owners, and he told me about it. And the one thing I asked him, I said, do you get a financial composite with your membership? And he said, yes, we do. I said, have you looked at it yet? He said, yes, I have. I said, are many of the other business owners more profitable than you are? And he said, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but yes, they are. I said, well, that's wonderful. You're in the right group then. So that's the way I feel, Wayne. Get with people that are better than you are, and you'll grow.
Kind of along those lines, you mentioned, and now I have a question, which I'll get to, Mike, thanks for that, right after this one. You had mentioned about role-playing and owners role-playing with their people, and I know that was hard for me when I got into sales management and sales leadership. I was hesitant. I came into but this will happen to business owners where they hire some salespeople who have more years of experience on their resume in sales. It can be intimidating to role-play sometimes. And so there's two things here. One is business owners tell me they don't have enough time for things like that. And the second thing is that is probably unspoken, but I know that I've experienced, and it is a bit of a fear that I might screw up in a role play. And if I'm role playing with somebody and I'm playing the part of the salesperson and I screw up, what does that say to my salesperson? So how do you address sales managers and owners, because it's a lot of who I work with, who are what I call reluctant sales managers. They don't have somebody else, so they have to be it. Do you need to be better than your salespeople to be a good coach, a good mentor, a good role play partner? How do you feel about some of those things that I've said?
Well, I sure hope my people are better than I am, because if you surround yourself with good people, you're going to be successful. But I think it goes back to, you got to have a good rapport with your people. It's okay to fail. It's okay to not be super sharp every moment of the day. And when you said they don't have enough time, that really galls me. I've heard that so many times, Wayne. There isn't anything more important than helping a person, a salesperson, a department, whatever, achieve their goals. That's where it's at. And you ought to be a good enough and efficient enough manager that you can prioritize your day and realize the most important thing that you have to do is work with your people to have them accomplish their goals. Because if each one accomplishes their goals, you're going to accomplish yours. But as far as screwing up, man, I mean, how many times do we go on a sales call and we screw it up? We come out of that sales call and we go, why did I do that? Well, you do the same thing in role playing, but that's how we learn. So develop a good relationship with your people. Salespeople, develop a good relationship with your manager. And it's okay to screw up. That's how we grow.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to ask Mike's question because Mike put a question in, and I want to get to those. And if anybody else has them, your questions are super important. So, Warren, Mike said, and I've been working with Mike and his sales managers to hire some salespeople. He says, what traits do you absolutely want to see in potential sales hires? Is his first question. And I'll read the whole question, and then we can take it in parts if we want to. So what traits do you absolutely want to see in potential sales hires? And is it good enough to see these traits measured on an assessment, or do you need to see demonstrated field success, which I assume would be more like a resume? If you have examples of success with either path, that would be great. Thank you. So we're using, that I've been using, you and I used a fair bit of DISC and motivators, drivers in assessing salespeople back in the day. Lately, I've been using those more as coaching tools for sales manager, and I've been using the Curlin Objective Management Group on the front end for assessing salespeople for attitude, sales DNA, what they're motivated by, things like that. But at any rate, what traits do you see in potential sales hires? What are you looking for? And then how do you balance success and what they tell you about success with what you see in assessments?
Well, I think the first thing that I would recommend to Mike is you be sure that you know what you want in your salesperson. And it all depends on what kind of business you have. But I really believe the concept of benchmarking, and Wayne, you know that well, and you can coach your people well on that. But the concept of benchmarking really lays out what the job is. As far as the traits, I would look for traits that are close to what your benchmark is. I personally believe a salesperson has to be a good decision maker. So I would ask the questions in my interview, which would be the next thing. Well, I think the benchmark, and then get the assessment done, and then when it gets to the interview, I would ask questions that I can determine, is this person a decision maker? Because that's much of what we have to do in sales. We have to make decisions on what prospect we want to go take time to see. We have to make decisions when we're in the sales call. Is it time to throw in the towel and leave, or do we hang in there and look for more of an affirmative? So you got to be a good decision maker. I don't want a person who loves people, and that's not what a lot of people look for to hire people. I often hear business people say, I want to hire people who like people. Well, I don't want to hire a person that likes people, because they'll fall in love with a prospect and they'll never get to a close. They can't go for a no. So I want a person who is good with people, but won't go and go to the bar if they don't make a sale. It's the old question. It's the old decision of what's next. I want a person who's okay with that. I hate resumes. I've never seen a bad resume in my life. I discount resumes to about 1% of the hiring process. I think the interview is very important. A face-to-face interview, if you can, if the person's in your area. Face-to-face interview. I'd put them in a role-play situation and give them a hypothetical situation and see how they perform in a role-play. You, as the Mike, would be the prospect, and let the salesperson role-play in the sales role. I don't know. There's really, if you follow a good process of benchmarking, do assessments, do a good telephone and then personal interview, role play with them, then it's kind of gut after that. There's no 100% in anything. People have to want it. There's one thing I want to add to that. Get to ask them what their why is. The why, W-Y. Why do they want to do this? Why do they want to come to work for you? Why do they want to meet their goals? Why do they want to achieve? What motivates them? I would ask them those questions, because I think that's very important. I want to know what drives them.
That's great. Super helpful. So once you hire somebody, Warren, how do you know quickly whether you made a good decision? How can you tell in the early, like, what are you looking for early on to know if it's a good fit? And or how would you then try to clarify expectations if you feel like you're on a different page? And by the way, Mike said fantastic, thanks in the chat box. But how do you know early, and then how do you, how do you keep things from getting off track? Because it seems like that happens sometimes quickly for both parties, and then both parties end the thing disgruntled.
Well, I think early on in this call, if I didn't say it, I meant to, and that is so many companies bring a salesperson on board, and I have kind of a one-liner that they say, you are one, and here's your briefcase and your flip chart, and go sell. That's like setting a person up for failure. I don't care how good, what credentials the person has. When that person comes to you, you ought to have a written onboarding process. Well, what's an onboarding process? It should be, what are you going to do day 1, day 2, day 3, week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. So the salesperson's got to know what that person's going through, what that person is going to go through to reach success in your company. You would be amazed, even you people that have salespeople on board, ask them to write one paragraph about the company. What are the company values? Ask them to write a paragraph on what the product is that your company sells, or if they don't sell a product, the service that your company provides. And you would be amazed, because we've done this in a lot of sales training. Sales people are sent out there and they don't know what their company's all about. They don't really understand their product or their service, and they got to go sell. And it's ridiculous. How are they going to bring value to their new customer or their new client if they don't understand those things? This is not just go sell a product or sell a service. This is a long-term relationship, which, by the way, I think that's very important, too, for all of you in the sales and in any area, any department of your company. For goodness sakes, take time and really get yourself some good coaching. I'm going to promote Wayne now in the ongoing coaching, counseling, and reinforcement, because he and I did this together, and I've done it for years with all my clients. This is not a one day, one moment, 1 month project. I used to tell all my clients, and Wayne was the same, I'm going to work with you for 3 months, and we're going to set goals of what we're going to do in those 3 months, and then we're going to determine, do we like each other enough? Are we bringing value to each other? To have an ongoing process. And many of my clients were with me for years and years and years. And there's nothing for a client to be with me 10 or 15 years, because you got to make sure that you're satisfying them, bringing value to them. So, sorry, I didn't mean to digress.
That's okay. And it's pretty similar for a salesperson, I guess, is what you're saying. If the agreement between the manager and the salesperson would be similar in that at 90 days we're going to work closely together, and then after that we're going to, if we both think it's a good fit, we're going to continue to work together, and a manager and their employees should have a similar relationship to the relationship I would have with a client, or that you had with me when I was your client. It's pretty similar to that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a two-way street. The salesperson should want that from his manager and his company. I say his. I'm telling you, I had a lot of great women that were outstanding salespeople in their organizations, and good women managers, by the way. But salespeople should want that as much as the company. The management should want the relationship. So it's a two-way street. There's absolutely no you got to work together on that kind of thing.
So there's two questions I have. One is a salesperson question, one's a manager one, and then I want to ask if other people have questions and try to push to get some audience questions a bit. The first question is the salesperson question. And you and I talk a bit, and you always act like technology has moved on in the last 5 years, and it certainly has changed a lot. But as I've said to you, there's so many things that are very much the same and foundational. And in fact, I think some of us get really confused because of all the technology coming at us, and we are trying all these different things and not keeping it simple the way that you outlined in your 1, 2, 3. Don't make it hard. That said, though, I do know one thing has really changed, and I'd be curious on your input, and there's some people on the phone I think could use this, and that is consumers today, whether it could be B2B, it could be business owners buying a product service, or it could be consumers. And I'm thinking of, I have 2 car salespeople who happen to work for my dad and his new car dealership, Warren. And they're working with this new phenomena. And what it is consumers today have access to lots of information very easily all over the internet. They can take themselves, it's often said that many consumers today are going 80% of the way to the buying decision on their own, or at least they would like to. They want to get all this information, try to do their own evaluations and such. And so one of the things that's difficult is to, early in the sales process, get people to view you as a consultant and somebody who can really be the guide to help them make the right decision and make a good decision as to whether they should part with, their either their current hard-earned money or money that they'll finance down the road, so on and so forth. And so having a real conversation where somebody drops their shield a bit and really engages with you, and specifically in the car dealer world, what they're all working to do is get people that they'd like to have people come in to view the cars, talk to them for real, as opposed to hiding behind the internet and the computer and the phone and so on, and kind of dodging and things like that. Of course, it's one of the challenges is you have competitors who are sort of harassing people sometimes without adding real value in that process, and just trying to berate them to come into the dealership. So people get a bit gun shy, consumers get a bit gun shy to that. What kind of advice would you have for us, me included, because I deal with the same thing with business owners who have lots of information about coaches and consultants on the internet? How can we engage? How do you think we might engage with people quickly to really understand their needs and have a good conversation?
Well, wow, that was a loaded question. It's very interesting that you say this, and I'm probably going to ask you to ask me one question to put this all in a nutshell. But Wayne, my sons, I think I said, took over our car company, bought our car company. So I often enjoy talking with them, and I say I couldn't even run your business right now because it's so internet driven. I think 80-85% of their prospects through the internet, whereas we advertise and make calls and that kind of thing. But and I'm gonna try to answer it in just another 30 seconds, and then you tell me if I was close to hitting the mark, which I don't know whether I am. I believe that people buy from people. Once you get a prospect, I think the important thing is that you ask enough questions to your prospect to be sure that you understand what their needs are, and we often call them their pains, where do they hurt. If we can find out where people hurt, then if we can, fill that need to satisfy their hurt, then we'll do business together. So I think asking questions is very important, but there's a whole new ball game with technology is how you first get to talk to the prospect, because so many times, we know in today when we make cold calls, it's not like it used to be where you could get through and have to fight through a gatekeeper a little bit, fight through the voicemail. Now, most of your prospects come through the internet to you. So I don't know whether I fielded that question, but why don't you ask it again, and maybe I can help. Maybe I won't. I don't know.
Well, I'll try to explain the internet one with that the car dealer folks would be working with. And it's similar to many of us. I have a company I'm working with who sells merchant services, credit card processing to small businesses, Warren, and it would be similar in their world too. And what happens is, the prospective client, car buyer or merchant is going to try to control all the information and make decisions themselves, but they call you, and the one piece that they may not know and want to know is, what's the price? What's the price? And we have to try to cut through that and get to have a conversation with them, or otherwise they're gone. If we just give them the price, we know they're probably gone, and we've lost control. So, any ideas on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, the first question that most people ask is how much, and the first questions we must ask is, what are the kind of things you want to accomplish, and then what is it worth to you to accomplish those things. So, this is part of the sales game. Early on, all of us have our prospects saying, how much? And we want to know, how much do they want? So I'm not familiar with the credit card processing company, but we need to find out what people really want to, and if you can fix what they want and they need, and those are the hurts that they have, price is really not important. Now, to an extent, but people will pay you to help them achieve their goals.
Gotcha. Good. So I think part of it is if pricing and money and points or whatever in the credit card world are what you have, and it's your leverage as a salesperson, if that's the last thing you have, then that's what you have. And some you'll win and some you'll lose when you try to engage them in a deeper discussion and really understand what their needs are, but that's all part of it. Sometimes they'll engage and sometimes they won't, but we know that as soon as in many cases, if they say how much and we tell them, the rest of the conversation is almost meaningless, because they're already calculating and figuring out in their head what's going on and making their own decisions, and they aren't listening to what we're saying.
Well, there are always your competitors. There's always a competitor that's going to beat your price. I've had it many, many times in my business. And I'm not saying walk away, but you got to be okay that sometimes we're not going to do business with people. If we can have people understand that we care and the value that we bring to them is better than our competitor, then that's when we do business. But if it's all about price, many times when I've run into a situation, well, just give me the bottom line. I'm not interested in anything else. There are all kinds of consulting companies in the world. Give me your bottom line, and then I'll apply. And then at that point, it's pretty much it's over, and I got to be okay with that. And I think you do too. If you're in a price battle that it's only price, tough. I'm walking.
How do you be okay with that? How do you be okay with walking? You've talked about attitude, and any tips for that?
Yeah, sure. Sales is a numbers game. I referenced cookbook several times, and I think you have another name for it. But my cookbook, I still remember to this day, it was 2017-841. That meant 20 prospects I had to have on my prospect list. 17 gatekeepers I'd have to fight through. 8 decision makers I had to talk to. 4 decision makers I needed to get an appointment from, and 1 would close. Now that was my particular cookbook, and everybody has a different cookbook depending on what business you're in. But so if if I had to have 20 prospects to make one sale, well, these guys that would hammer me for a price, unfortunately, they fell into the 19 people that I wasn't going to do business with. So I have to be okay with that. And if you have a good plan as to how you're going to achieve your goals, and then you work that plan, you're going to get some of these.
I guess that's partly why you're looking for a person who doesn't like people. Not that they don't like them, but I mean that they aren't complete. One of the findings that we look at with, and I know you haven't, I don't think you've seen the OMG or the Curlin assessments in some time, but they've changed and updated. One of the things is called need for approval. Like, do I need other people's approval? There's a difference between I enjoy people, like people, versus I need their approval, and I need them to like me, or else it crushes me.
Yeah, the need for approval is absolutely, that's a killer in sales. I'm telling you, I had a sales associate one time who worked for me, who worked in our consulting company, who probably was the best sales consultant in prospecting, in driving that sale right down to finding out what their pains were, how they hurt, but he couldn't close. And his problem was he could not take rejection. He could not take somebody that said, I don't want you, I don't like you, etc. And he'd just fall apart. So I'd have to have a therapy session. It seemed like every time he came back from a sales call. Wonderful guy. He just loved to have him for dinner. But he couldn't, he needed that need for approval. That Wayne, exactly what you said. It doesn't cut it in sales.
So if anybody has a question, type it in, because we're getting close to the hour, and I know we planned for an hour, but if you have a question, please go in the question box and type it so I don't miss it. Warren, you just made me think of, I have to ask you this because it's a sales and sales management call, and everybody probably wants to know. You just talked about closing the sale. So what's your favorite close, or what's your favorite closing question? Isn't that what most people in sales would want to ask you right now?
Sure, and I have one, and it falls into the technique, so write it down. There's only one closing question that I ever ask and ever want to know. And I ask the person, the prospect, what would you like to have happen next? And then shut up. If you sincerely ask your prospect, what would you like to have happen next? They will tell you the sale's over or how they can be closed. What would you like to have happen next? And shut up.
Shutting up is hard. At all stages. Does anybody have a question? Yeah. Does anybody have a question? You want to raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. Is that Julia? Do you want to ask? I'm going to put your hand down in case. Do you mind taking another question or two, Warren? We're getting close to the end of the hour.
No, go ahead. I'm just going over to the gym with my wife.
Hi, Warren.
Mike, you there?
Yeah, I am. Appreciate it. Warren, fantastic stuff here today. I've been taking a lot of notes. Really appreciate your time today very much. That question, I've heard it asked in a lot of different varieties, that last best question. But I like that wording very much because you're giving control to the customer, and customers want to feel like they're in control. Taking a guy like the extreme example you had of the one who couldn't deal with rejection. Have you ever seen that using a tool like that help transform somebody to success that they weren't expecting?
Oh, would you please say that again? I'm not sure.
So, a tool like that can be so powerful if it's in the right hands, is my experience. And it's, as Wayne touched on, it's the setup that gets you there to have the interaction and rapport with the folks to be able to ask that question. But I was just curious if you'd ever seen the use of a question like that help transform somebody like the guy you described who just had absolute fear of rejection. Have you ever seen that happen?
Well, yeah, I think that's a really good question.
Go ahead.
I think it's a really good question because in a sales call like we're doing right now, in a training environment, we're pretty tough. It's black and white. It's you do this, you don't do that, and I don't mean to come off pretty tough, but that's what we have to do in our sales call. In a real sales event, the sales event is very nurturing. Now, that doesn't mean wimping. The sales event is nurturing, and you got to nurture, 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 and when you get to the point that you think it's time to move to the close, stumble and struggle a little bit. A lot of prospects fear us because they think, hey, we've got all the techniques and all the stuff. Drop down a little bit in a very nurturing, quiet kind of environment. Just stumble and struggle a little bit and say, Sally, what do you think we ought to do next? And just like that, shut up and very nurturingly, just cool and calm. What do you think we ought to have happen next? And so help me. It's the best close that I could ever share with you because I've used it so many times. My clients have used it so many times, and they'll tell you. They'll tell you. If you have good bonding and, well, anyway, that's what I would suggest.
I rewrote what I wrote down. I wrote the exact wording this time. What do you think we ought to have happen next? Because that exact wording is very critical there, because it's an inclusive at the same time giving them control. It's just rarely do I write things down in the sales world word for word, but I'm going to tell you, Warren, I wrote that one down word for word.
Well, I tell you what, I like what you just said, because please, you people in management and ownership, don't have your salespeople memorize what you say. Yeah. Have them get the concept. But the important thing is, in a sales call, have your salespeople go in there and be themselves. You got to be you on a sales call. And for them to memorize scripts and stuff that you tell them, it doesn't work because they're not themselves. So here you go. I didn't catch your name. What was your name?
I'm Mike Toms. I'm with Penn Warranty Corporation, yes.
Okay, you heard what Mike said, all of you. Mike put it in his words, and he wrote it down. See, now he's going to use that. If I said a word or two that didn't fit for Mike, he wouldn't use that. So if he was told by his manager, this is what you do, it wouldn't be him. So here's where role play comes in. Role play and let them put their own words into it as long as the concept is right. Is that fair enough, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with you. And thanks for sharing that gem with me. As I said, I wrote a bunch down, but that one's got stars next to it.
It worked for you, but remember, you're not going to close everyone. You're not going to close every sales call.
Yeah, I understand.
Be okay,
Absolutely.
be okay with a no every once in a while, but that one will work for you. That's magic for you.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
So probably everyone, we should wrap it up. Anybody, is there one more? Anybody have one more question for Warren before we go? If you raise your hand on the console, I can check in and ask. Warren, I've got one more that I want to write down, and I didn't get to it. And it was, so many of my clients are at the point where they're transitioning from they were the salesperson, and now they want to hire a team, and they're trying to scale that, and they're trying to get that working, but it's hard to transition. You can be a great salesperson, but it's really difficult to get your first few people hired on board and get them to be the ones doing the selling. So last question is just any advice for how do you make that transition? How do you get it to the point where one thing a Warren gem that didn't come out today is you used to grill on me all the time that there's only two bad things that can happen if you take over a sales call. One thing's in my head. Maybe tell people what the answer to that is, and then just last bit of advice, how do you transition from being the salesperson to starting to really build a team and have them be the ones out there representing and being the face of the company?
Well, I'm going to ask you, what are the two bad things that can happen on a sales call?
It could go really well, and I could take over and I could win the sale, and the salesperson will look at me and think, well, that was really awesome, but I could never do that. Or I could take over and I could bomb, and it could be awful, and the salesperson could look at me and say, see, I told you so. I knew it wouldn't work. Am I close?
Yes, you're absolutely right. See, I missed it, and that's why I reversed you to repeat that, because you're talking about you go out, the salesperson on the sales call. If you want to go out and show that person how to sales call, you're going to screw it up. So, yeah, those two things are perfect. So, how do you build a sales team? You do what I said earlier. I believe that it's not a simple process. You got to benchmark the job that you want done. You got to get some good assessments to work with and get the prospective people. You got to interview them people, and when you bring them on board, you got to onboard them properly and help them ongoing, help them to succeed.
And you could fail with the first few people that you hire too, right?
No question about that, because there are a lot of things that go into success. You all know that because you're successful in what you do now, but there are a lot of things that cause people not to succeed, and some of those things we can't find out until they're on board. So yes, you're going to have some failures. There's no doubt about it.
That's great. Well, Warren, thank you so much. I know it's 5 after 2. You've hung out for another couple minutes. If anybody has a question, do you mind if they email it to me? Can I pass it on to you in the next week or so? Would that be okay?
Absolutely, Wayne. You and I have worked together long enough to know that we love what we do, and there's nothing that excites me more than to see people grow in this business. And from our hour on the phone today, I've picked up some things, and I'll look at my notes, and I've grown too from what we talked about today. So yeah, absolutely, send me whatever or call me.
Thanks, Warren. You're always so giving. Thanks for sharing an hour with us. And everybody, thanks for being here and joining in and for your questions. And with that, we'll wind it up and end for the day. Thanks again.
Thanks, Wayne. Bye-bye.
Okay.